Just a few opening remarks. In the previous session, we dealt with Turkey, both domestically and regionally. Now we are about to do the same with regard to Iran. From historical perspective, going back to the 1920s and 30s, both Turkey and Iran served as the right wing in Middle Eastern politics. Sorry. In that they promoted an intensive and even aggressive drive for modernization and secularization and westernization, linking the faith to the West. This was an ambitious project which eventually paved the way for an assertive Islamic politics to take hold of state power. In Turkey it was by legal electoral means, and in Iran by revolutionary means. The establishment of Islamic regime was also accompanied by an assertive regional policy. Sorry, I had to rush to the session. Notably, we are speaking of two different versions of Islamic politics. The Turkish case is more open and ecumenical, based on gradual synthesis developed over the years between Islam, modernity, and democracy. While the Iranian case is more dogmatic and theocratic. Nevertheless, both versions faced dilemmas and challenges and had to maneuver between ideological vision and political reality or constraints. Some of these dilemmas were discussed in the previous panel regarding Turkey, and this is also the aim of the present panel regarding Iran and its relations with the Persian Gulf. Relations between Iran and the Persian Gulf specifically, and with the Arab world in general, have been aggravated in recent years in light of Shia empowerment in the Middle East that resulted from three major developments. First, the overthrow of the Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq in 2003, which turned the Shias into the new master of the country and ignited sectarian strife between Sunnis and Shias. The second development was the Second Lebanese War in the summer of 2006, which transformed Hezbollah into an icon of effective resistance against Israel and enhanced its aspiration to control Lebanon. And the last development, Iran's quest for nuclear weapon capability. Now, some Arab leaders warned of the emergence of a Shiite crescent along the Tehran-Baghdad axis. The Shia quest for power, however, could not conceal internal divisions, disputes, and fractures within the Shiite camp, most prominently in Iran. The intertwining of Iran's volatile domestic arena with its quest for hegemonic regional status will thus be explored here, I hope, by our four distinguished speakers. Each of them will have about 20 minutes, and at the end we'll open the floor for questions and comments. The first speaker is Professor David Menashri, who I assume is no need of introduction, nor do his numerous publications over the years. I'll just say that Professor Menashri holds several academic positions at Tel Aviv University, including Director of the Center for Iranian Studies, Nazarian Chair of Modern Iranian Studies, and Professor at the Department of Middle Eastern and African History. Professor Menashri's main field of research is history and politics of modern Iran, Central Asia, the Persian Gulf, and history of education in the Muslim world. Today we will talk of pragmatism versus radicalism, Iran's domestic politics and regional implications. David, please, the floor is yours.
Shalom, good afternoon, and thank you, Meir. Speaking about Iran is always a problem, because years back when I was asked to speak about Iran, I didn't know where to start because no one really knew about Iran. And today I don't know where to start because everyone is expert on Iran. So what I try to do, just to, while trying to focus on the domestic scene, try and hopefully put it in a better perspective or wider perspective of the developments in Iran. Although the title of my presentation also deals with regional implications, now having noticed that two other speakers are speaking about the regional, I'll save you my thought about the regional implications, but I'm afraid I won't be able to resist saying few words about the implication for Israel and the Israeli response to the Iranian situation. Now, the Iranian Revolution will be celebrating, or marking, better to say, in February 31 years to the Islamic Revolution. And I think that the main question in the air in Iran in the last few years is a very simple question. Young people in Iran ask themselves, is this what we hoped for 30 years ago when we or our parents went to overthrow the Shah and establish Islamic Republic in Iran? And I think if you go to the streets of Iran and ask this simple question, chances are the vast majority of the people would say that the expectations were much higher than realities show today. The Iranian people are struggling over 100 years for two major goals. Simply put, I can say that they are fighting for bread and liberties, freedom and welfare. And the Iranian Revolution came with the hope of elevating the pressures on the people of Iran and bringing them, I almost say, to the promised land. 30 years after, it's clear to many people, mainly to the young generation, that the revolution so far has not delivered. So while the revolution was successful in maintaining power, the first aim of any revolutionary or non-revolutionary new government, there is a degree of stability with all the problems that we can see in Iran today. But I think the more important aim of the revolution was to elevate or ease the burdens on the people of Iran. And in this sense, I think the revolution has not yet shown any success. Before going on, I want to, one brief point about pragmatism and radicalism. These terms are very difficult to really qualify, because sometimes, you know, all the pragmatists today that I'll be speaking about them are the old radicals of 30 years ago. If they're even thinking about Ayatollah Montazeri, who passed away this week, there's a symbol of Iranian liberalism and openness and pragmatism. One should remember that he was the heir apparent of Ayatollah Khomeini, one of the most radical people in Iran 30 years ago. So when I speak about pragmatists, I'll be speaking about their attitudes today and not what they used to be years back. The three questions that I wanted to open my talk with is the first, and I only briefly just put them on your table, is the question of to what degree this revolution that we call Islamic revolution. You know, today we say Islamic revolution, Islamic republic, Islamic terrorism, everything is Islamic. I think people should ask, what do we mean by Islamic? To what degree the revolution in Iran of 1979 was religious movement, was Islamic movement? Well, I happen to think that it was much wider than the term religious imply in Western civilization. In Islamic term, of course, it was Islamic, it was religious, it was social, economic, political, cultural, international. Everything in the world of Islam, like in Judaism, falls within the limits of what we call religion. But if you use Western terminology, the revolution was much wider than religious, narrowly defined in the Western culture. I happen to live in Iran the last 2 years of the Shah's rule. Had I been Iranian citizen, I might have been with Ayatollah Khomeini, not because of Islam and not because of religion, because life was miserable. And the whole, what the revolution was about, is bringing hope to the young people of Iran for a brighter future. And I think this is important to keep in mind, because whoever speaks about stability in Iran and the ultimate stability of this regime, it does not depend to the degree of return to Islam, but rather to the degree, in my view, that the revolution will be capable of meeting the expectations which brought the revolution 31 years ago to power. The second, in many ways, however, it was a revolution that led to the creation of Islamic Republic. In many ways, the revolution has been intercepted from the many different groups that led to this movement with Ayatollah Khomeini, communists, liberals, nationalists. The ultimate result is an Islamic Republic. But the aim of the people, I think, was much wider than religious in the narrow meaning of the word. The second question is to what degree the philosophy of this revolution is Islamic or represent Islamic philosophy. And there again is the question, what is Islamic philosophy? Is there one thing that we can call this, yes, this is Islam? Well, probably yes. It's the Islam that the Prophet Muhammad brought in the 7th century. But we don't live today as Jews, as Judaism used to be 3,000 years ago. Christianity today is not exactly what it used to be 2,000 years ago. And why should we believe that Islam today is exactly what it was brought to earth in the 7th century? We live today according to our interpretation of the principles of faith, and our interpretations tend to vary from generation to generation, from place to place. Not every day, by over centuries, you can see shifts and changes. And I would claim that what we see in the Islamic revivalism in Iran, in Islamic revolution in Iran, is a revolution in understanding of Islam, interpretation of Islam, more than it is an Islamic revolution. Ayatollah Khomeini brought doctrine that was on the margin of the Islamic religious establishment, brought them to the center, in the case of Iran, to power, influencing Hamas, Hezbollah, FIS, and other movements. But what should remember, this philosophy did not have much following before the revolution, and in many ways it doesn't have much followings today in Iran. And I'll come to it when I speak about a more reformist trend. It was in many ways, as I said, a revolution in the interpretation of Islam rather than purely Islamic revolution. And to quote Abdul Karim Soroush, again, one leading pragmatist today, who was the father of the Iranian cultural revolution in the early days of the revolution, the man who was responsible to closure of the universities for Islamization, and today he is on the other side. And he said a sentence that I think it contains all the philosophy that I want to sell you this moment. He said that there is no one interpretation of Islam, there is no one interpretation that is better than the other, and there is no final interpretation of Islam. And in a very courageous way, he added, and there can be no official interpretation of Islam, namely that even the highest ranking Ayatollah, whoever he is, even an Islamic regime cannot tell you this is the sole interpretation. There is not such a thing in the world of Islam. There are different, mainly in Shiite Islam, different people have their own right to reinterpret principles of faith and adjust them to the realities of life. When Khomeini came to power in 1979, there have been 7 grand ayatollahs in Iran. None of them supported Khomeini. Today, one of the most leading ayatollahs in Iran, Sistani in Iraq, does not accept Khomeini or Khomeini's philosophy. Of the leading grand ayatollahs, Ayatollah Uzma, Maraji al-Taqlid, the highest sources of interpretation of law, none of them really supports Khamenei and Khomeini, not to speak about it. Khamenei himself is not a supreme religious authority. The third question is to what degree the policy of this regime is faithful to the ideology with which it came to power. And what happened in Iran is not surprising to whoever follows changes of regime and revolutionary movements. Usually there is a huge difference between what people say in opposition and what they do in power. It's not typical to one country or another. You can see it in every country in the world. In opposition, you say whatever you wish. There is no tax on promises. Then when you come to power, you can do only what you can do. And just to quote our former Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, who said when he was challenged on the unilateral withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, he said, what you see from here, from the chair of the Prime Minister, you don't see from there, from the benches of the opposition. With authority comes responsibility. And when even you are the leader of the Islamic revolution, when you are in power, you have to feed 70 million people today. Dogma by itself is insufficient. You have to be more pragmatic. So in a way, pragmatism is built in the system of government from the first day of the Iranian revolution. And just to bring you one fatwa by Ayatollah Khomeini, shortly before he passed away, luckily for them, he issued a fatwa saying that for the sake of maslahah, for the sake of the interest of the people, is legitimate for Islamic regime to destroy mosques and suspend the 5 arkanul Islam, the 5 pillars of Islam. What else you need as a justification for pragmatism in power? And I could have given you so many different examples. Wherever there was a clash between the ideology of the revolution and the interest of the state, interest ultimately won over ideology. Now, to what degree you have to go towards pragmatism and deviate from dogma, in what field, in what rate, what speed, on this there are differences of opinions. And I think we could see the 2 phases of Iran in the most lively way before and after the election of June. you could see this wonderful show of democracy and openness in Iran before the elections, and you could see the ugly face of Iran immediately after, with the violent suppression of the young people of Iran in the street of Tehran and other cities of the country. Let's make clear, although I heard that yesterday it was declared here that Iran is going to be the first democracy in the Muslim world. I don't know, because I don't really know what the future will bring. But I think there is a nice face of Iran. Iran has a wonderful young people, brilliant students. There are more girls than boys in universities in Iran today. 60% of the students are female, while 60 years ago there was not even a single woman studying in any university in Iran. The newspapers in Iran are fun to read until they are being closed. Books being published in Iran are interesting. I'll give you a title of a book published in Tehran by Ahmed Ganji. Today he's in Washington. The title is A Fascist Interpretation of Islam. And Akbar Ganji claims in this book that the Iranian regime is fascist. Of course he went to jail. You can't write such a book in Iran and not go to jail. But the book was sold in many editions in Tehran. Take Mohsen Kadivar, one of the leading intellectuals in Iran. I think today he's in Harvard. He wrote an article with the title Moshkele Asli Iran Velayat Faqih Ast. I know that most of you speak Arabic or Persian, you know. The problem number one of Iran is the rule of the clergy. Although he's a Hujjatul Islam, he also went to Evin jail for some time. But I think that you can see this play between the pragmatists voicing their criticism, expressing themselves, paying the price, and continuing the struggle. And you could see again in the last couple of few months, from June on, the young people of Iran demonstrating in the streets of Iran more than you can see in any other country in the Muslim Middle East. Is there freedom in Iran? I don't know. There is a degree of open expression, but there is also a violent suppression. And I always quote a good friend of mine from one of the Iranian universities that I was speaking with him about his tension between free expression and suppression. And he told me that they tell you there is no freedom of expression in Iran. That's not true. We have freedom of expression. What we don't have is freedom after expression. And I think that's the case of Iran. There is a degree of free expression, but they pay the price. But the problem is that all these pragmatists, young, wonderful women, don't have a say anything on when it comes to question of national security or dictate or making policy in Iran. Policy is in the hand of the other camp, the radicals. And they have four major elements of power. First, they speak in the name of God. Well, it's wonderful in Muslim country, also in a Jewish country, that you wake up in the morning and you know exactly what is the will of God. And they have the monopoly of the interpretation of what God wants. Now, if you have God on one side, it should be sufficient. If it's not, God forbid, it should be. But if just in case God's word support is not enough, they have the army and the Revolutionary Guard. Now, if you are a revolution, you have the will of God on one side, the arm of the Revolutionary Guard on the other side, you are safe. And the third element of power that they have is the determination to fight for their power, for their survival. I quote only Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, the mentor of Ahmadinejad, who said when students riots in 1999, he said that whoever thinks that Islam is religion of mercy does not understand what is Islam. Islam dictates to us to take sharp sword and cut the heads and the tongues of people who speak or act against us. The other advantage that they have is there is no opposition. A word about the situation today, and I think that Iran is in a very crucial juncture after the June elections. Although on the surface it's silent, it's quiet, I think under the surface there is a lot going on that goes back to two main reasons. One is the unfulfilled expectation of the revolution, which is the main cause for popular unrest. And the second is the emergence of Obama in the White House. Now, what it has to do, whenever you have a Democrat administration in Washington, rest assured it's going to be riots, demonstrations, revolution in Tehran. And not because the Democrat presidents are really willing to have revolutions in Iran, because they come with this promise to support human rights. Now, go back to Iranian history. American involvement in Iran is not very long. The first time that you could see the revolution in Iran when America was involved in 1951 with Harry Truman in the White House. In 1961, when Khomeini became a national hero in opposing the Shah, Kennedy was in the White House. In 1978, it was Carter, and now it's Obama. And Obama came with this promise not only for dialogue, which gave heart to the young people of Iran, and also his slogan was very appealing, yes, we can. And by the way, it's not really the slogan of Obama. This is the slogan of Ahmadinejad from 2005 elections. That say, it's possible and yes, we can. But I think that the emergence of Obama, with the promise of dialogue, with the promise to support human rights, encouraged people to go to the street and demand for change. Unfortunately for them, when they were in the streets, Obama decided to be quiet for 10 days, which is very untypical to him. And I think that it was it was easy to decide what to do, because in 1953, America interfered in Iran. It was bad. In 1978, it did not interfere. It was also bad. So they were considering what to do, but opportunity has passed. I think that it's a crucial time, because I think that the antagonism and the criticism is not against Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad is not the main issue. And the main issue, I think, it's Khamenei and the system of government. And this regime that so far has been basing itself on religiosity, morality, ideology of Islam, it's now based almost exclusively on the power of the Revolutionary Guards and the Basijis. The legitimization of this regime is not as it used to be before. And Khamenei, unlike Khomeini, did not put himself above the different factions, but rather identified with one against the other. Therefore, he turned himself into a small actor in the political scene. And again, unlike Khomeini, that always kept himself beyond the rival factions. Now, the weaknesses of the pragmatists, or whatever you call them, played also to the hands of the radicals. Because, well, I've never been in a revolution myself, and I'm not a revolutionary, but that's not the way to have to go to revolution. You don't have a charismatic leader. If at all, his wife is much more charismatic than Mousavi is. And you could see it when the debate on television between Ahmadinejad and Mousavi. Ahmadinejad did not attack Mousavi, he attacked his wife, which is very something that Iranians don't usually do. But the problem was that Mousavi is not a natural leader, because he doesn't want to change the system. Khomeini's slogan was clear: the Shah must go. Islam is the solution. You know what's the problem, you know what's the solution. Mousavi says we want to change 30% of political structure, 40% of the political system, 50% of the economic realities. That's not the way to push millions of people behind you. To have it turn a popular movement, you need to have a movement that is based not only on fight for democracy, but also for bread. Do I have 3-4 minutes?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, wow. That's, so let me say about the implication on the region with an eye only on Israel. I think on this issue of Israel and the Iran nuclear program, Israel has done all possible mistakes. And I don't want to echo what Nachmani said about Israel and Turkey, but I think that in this case, it's not much different. That we volunteer to jump at the head of the queue and say, yes, we have the solution and we are willing to do the job. I wonder if we are willing. I'm not sure we have the capabilities. I think that in the last few years, this repeated slogan of the Israelis, as though they are the one who will deal with these hot potatoes, is very wrong. And ultimately, what the world would say, okay, you have the solution, go and do it. And now I hear that Obama in China is also waving with the Israeli threat, although there is a limit how much he can hold Israel. I think we should hold ourselves. I think the less we speak on the issue of Iran by our politicians is better for Israel. And I even wrote to one of our politicians, there was a beautiful movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. If you want to shoot, shoot, don't talk. Israel did not threaten Iraq before attacking it. Israel didn't threaten Syria. There is no use for these slogans. Now, what is the solution? And I just refer to 3 types of solution. One is American-led solution. American-led solution can be either dialogue or engagement. I supported dialogue much before Obama was candidate to the presidency because I think there is no alternative for dialogue first. And dialogue, although may not bring to a solution of the problem, it will challenge the regime in Iran and speak to the Iranian people and to the American people who do not have the stomach today to go to another war or engagement in Iran, the military engagement, after what they have experienced in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the only people who really understood the challenge of dialogue to the Iranian regime were the clerics in Iran, who say that this is not carrot and stick, the carrot is poisoned. And this carrot that you speak, give hope to the young people of Iran. That's what you need. And I think that it is a smart policy, but it should have a deadline. It should have other preconditions. But I think that dialogue in itself is not bad. Then you have pressure, and Iran can be pressured. There was only one time that Europe pressured Iran seriously. It was after the Mykonos trial, and the court found Iranian officials guilty in acts of terrorism in the Mykonos case in the restaurant in Berlin. All EU countries returned their ambassadors from Tehran. This was punishment for the Iranians. As I said earlier, wherever they have to pay a very heavy price, they will reconsider. There is moral pressure on Iran that should begin in Europe, should begin in the free world. And I don't see much about what's going on in the jails of Iran, in the press, in the statements all over the world. The second level of change, response is regional. I don't want to say much about it, it's one sentence. I think that if the Arab world really wants to solve to ease or to weaken Iran, one way to weaken Iran is to solve the Israeli-Palestinian problem. It goes also for the Israelis. If we and the Arabs will manage to solve the problems between us and the Palestinians, if we will be able to solve the problem between Israel and Syria, Iran will not be the same powerful Iran as it pretends to be today. Iran is not so powerful as we make them appear. They have the weaknesses, and the world should learn how to treat them, and there is a regional response, but I think that rather than, I heard in the newspaper that I read that the Saudis are considering to give Israel use of the airspace to attack the Iranian sites. Well, rather than giving us airspace, go and do it yourself. You have the space, you have the air, you have the Air Force, and having an embassy in Tel Aviv, I don't say Jerusalem because it would be too much, Ramat Gan, doesn't matter, would help weakening Iran more than anything else that the Saudis can do at this time. And finally, and with this I will close, I think the main source of change in Iran are the people of Iran themselves. Iran is the only country in the Middle East which had two big revolutions in the 20th century. The Islamic Revolution was brought by the people of Iran, and I think it's the people of Iran who ultimately will have to change the policy or change the regime in Iran. And personally, I don't care about the regime in Iran. They can have whatever regime they want. It's their business. I care about the policy of this regime, and it's up to the people of Iran. And I think that what we see today in Iran is basically two trends simultaneously in motion. One is the nuclear program, and the other is the socio-political change in Iran. And unfortunately, if we think about two trains which already have left the terminal, the train with nuclear capabilities is driving much faster than the train of social change inside Iran. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for your intriguing talk. The youth that David mentioned in his presentation is an essential component of viable civil society in Iran, which the clerical regime failed to demolish or crush. A recent powerful manifestation was the riots that erupted following the June elections, which was depicted by local and Western observers as the stolen election. This episode revealed the vitality of the Iranian civil society, but also exposed its fragility in the face of a powerful and even brutal regime. This episode will be discussed now by Dr. Liora Hendelman-Baavur. Dr. Liora Hendelman-Baavur teaches courses about modern Iranian history in the Department of Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies, the Hebrew University, and in the program of Contemporary Middle Eastern Studies, Tel Aviv University. She is a research fellow of the Center for Iranian Studies at Tel Aviv University, and also a research fellow at the Truman Institute. Her field of research include civil society, gender and youth in Iran, and the new media in the Middle East. Dr. Hendelman-Baavur is co-editor with Professor Menashri of the Hebrew volume Iran, Anatomy of Evolution, published in May 2009 by Kibbutz HaMeuchad. Her lecture is titled Between a Rock and a Hard Place, Iranian Youth and the Post-Election Turmoil.
I didn't have the opportunity yet, because this is the first time I'm on stage as a speaker and not as the organizer of this conference. So I
forgot to mention, by the way.
Okay, so I'll do it. I would like to take this opportunity in the meantime, as I turn on the computer, to thank the organizing committee of this conference, to Professor Amnon Cohen, to Professor Reuven Amitai, who is somewhere over here, to Professor Eli Podeh, and to Dr. Meir Hatina, and of course to the Ruth and Mordechai Abir Foundation for sponsoring the event. I would also like to thank very important people. I wouldn't be able to do everything we did in the past couple of days without their help and their assistance. I would like to thank Yael over here, and Zhenya the girl and Zhenya the boy. Thank you guys, and Irena for all the support and continuous assistance from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. I also have a confession. Okay. I had to change my presentation today a little bit because of recent development in Iran. So I will be around the neighborhood of my topic, but I don't think you will regret.
Shall we step down?
Yes. I don't think you will regret the twist that I'm going to make. And I will soon explain the reason for the twist of my topic. 5 days ago, on December 17th, countless online press articles reported that the free social networking and microblogging service Twitter was hacked by a group that identified itself as the Iranian cyber army. As of this moment, we don't have much information about this group or individual or individuals, yet among the several messages displayed by the Iranian cyber army, all of which carry religious connotations, there is a partial reference from the 5th surah in the Quran, or the table spread chapter. I'm referring to the caption in blue letters that reads, "Indeed, the party of Allah, they will be victorious or triumphant." The same reference also appears on the flag of the Lebanese Hezbollah on the top of the revolver. Twitter was not the only target of the Iranian cyber army's recent activism. The opposition website, Green Wave of Freedom, also redirected viewers to the same webpage in the last couple of days. Inspired by Mir Hussein Mousavi's message, the Green Wave of Freedom was established outside Iran as a social network aiming to provide the most reliable news and analysis regarding events following the presidential elections in June. Yet the attack against Twitter, as Adam Vincent of the Web2 Journal summarizes this web sensation, is one of the most high-profile instances of a politically motivated group attacking a website. The specific attack against Twitter by the Iranian cyber army is not at all surprising. During the post-election turmoil, Twitter became a predominant channel in covering the riots and demonstrations that took place in Iran. With the Iranian government evacuating all representatives of the foreign press out of Iran, jamming cell phones and text messages, and blocking temporarily access to many social networking, such as Facebook, Twitter has emerged as one of the mediums with the most information being passed around and discussed about the turbulent presidential elections in Iran. As Twitter's annual report for 2009 indicates, of all trending topics appearing on this list, including Michael Jackson and Susan Doyle, in the people category, Iran-related topics finished in the top 21 list. In addition, hashtags or Twitter tracking words relating to Tehran, Iran, and Iran elections finished in the top 10 trending topics in the category of news. Most surprisingly, Iran election is ranked first, even above swine flu. However, the actual role played by Twitter among citizens residing in Iran is a little controversial and problematic. Available data is inconclusive regarding the magnitude of the local Twitter use, and there are reports indicating that most of the tweets covering the local events originated from outside of Iran, not from inside. In other words, information was sent from Iran by various electronic channels, such as email accounts and text messages via cellular phones, and disseminated by outside net users in large volumes via tweets. This sort of messages, actually, on Twitter, called twits, were dominated by English messages. Although Farsi messages were also posted and translated to other languages, again, most tweets were posted in English. Another problem with identifying the influence of Twitter inside Iran is associated with the rising necessity of keeping Twitter users residing in Iran anonymous. As soon as the international media associated the post-election protest with the Twitter revolution, the Islamic Republic began to monitor Twitter messages in addition to Facebook accounts, collective blogs, and local electronic news outlets in order to locate the sources within Iran. This message pinpointed to the specific website set by the Iranian authorities to identify and locate individual protesters from photos of the demonstrations. Following this initiative, Iranian activists became more and more reluctant to expose themselves online. Another problem with determining the influence of Twitter from inside Iran relates to the fact that 1 out of 4 messages on Twitter were retweets, meaning replications of the same message over and over again. In relation to tweets' contents, messages addressing the Iranian post-election turmoil were of various natures. They include the distribution of logistic information about spontaneous rallies, information about the locations of Revolutionary Guards and security forces, and the entire organization of the massive street demonstrations, as well as reports of the events as they took place in Iran. Messages relating and related to Mousavi supporters were also being processed online. In addition to these contents, many international tweet users were also showing solidarity with the Iranian protesters and supported their claim in the form of the question, "Where is my vote?" The most frequent form of solidarity with turning the Twitter icon green, as we can see here, the wall on Twitter, the green wall on Twitter. Others were offering technical assistance, such as ways to bypass filtering, blocking, and alternative proxies and gateways for anonymous surfing. As the confrontations between Iranian demonstrators and security forces intensified, there were tweets directing the Iranian protesters to other forms of technical support of street warfare. Some tweets were reflecting the curiosity of international Twitter users, account holders, by raising interesting questions such as, who is Iran and why am I hearing so much about his tweets? While some were trying to figure out who is Iran, other savvy net users from around the world joined by online campaign on Twitter and worked to sustain the Iranian green wave on top of the news charts by tweeting. Yet for the international Twitter users, the biggest obstacles did not arrive from the Islamic Republic, but from other attention-grabbing news items. The most serious obstacle in that respect was the death of the American TV icon Farrah Fawcett on June 25th. And even a bigger news item was the sudden death, the unexpected death of the American pop king Michael Joseph Jackson on the same day. Now, wait, I'm going backwards. Okay, and here you can see the war on Twitter between the news on Iran election and the news about the death of Michael Jackson. And I don't think I need to quote that. And I apologize for my personal censorship, but I don't want to expose my sources online or target them. Going head to head with Michael Jackson news, the following graphs. Okay, here. The following graphs shows a high volume of the Iranian elections topic over additional news items as well. Also during early July. Additional indicators online might support the argument that more than Twitter helped the post-election protest in Iran, the post-election protest in Iran helped Twitter. Up until mid-June 2009, the microblogging service Twitter, that was established in 2006, was operating on the fringe of online social networking. Yet within a couple of weeks, from mid-June to early July, Twitter has managed to shape its branding from a what you're doing line, social site, to a real-time news source. Regardless of the mentioned controversial influence of Twitter in Iran itself, operating as the trendiest news source made Twitter, on the one hand, a new target online, replacing traditional notions against the BBC and CNN as media outlets controlled by Western powers. And this notion also becomes clear when we consider the Iranian cyber army's specific message while hacking Twitter. This message can also be addressed not only to the Western media, but to the American administration as well, about who is in actual control of the new media. On the other hand, Twitter became the predominant symbol in the Western media, and hence in the Western public conscience of the recent election in Iran, making it especially appealing for hacktivists who operate in support of the Islamic Republic. Further indicators online point that the Twitter revolution was more influential outside Iran than inside the country. For instance, cartoons that were published during the Iranian post-election turmoil in the international, mostly Western media, demonstrate various symbols acquired by Twitter during the protest as it evolved. The next set, the set that you can see here, use a highly familiar message and connotations from Iran, US, Iran, Western relations for the last 30 years, while associating it with a new Twitter medium. Of course, the Great Satan, as the United States is known in the Islamic Republic's terminology. In the next, this way. In these next two cartoons, Twitter is associated with another connotation from the religious terminology, associating Twitter with an infidel on the one hand, and of course the twit is mightier than the sword, perhaps an insinuation to the jihadi sword or to the Islamic sword. Okay. The colorful cartoon also reminds us of the cartoon on your right, but here we have the shadow of the Statue of Liberty, and this associates Lady Liberty with Twitter as well. Okay. The next set of cartoons associate Twitter with liberty, with rescue, and with assistance. Twitter is actually represented as the only medium that was in the service to help Iranians while protesting. And we can see the way it is manifested online through different mediums, including aljazeera.net. Another form of representation of Twitter is the power twit. Again, the only power that the West could offer Iranian protesters and demonstrators was in the form of the free bird, and we can see how the leadership in Iran is actually reacting to the powerful power twit. As the collision between demonstrators and protesters on the one hand and security forces in Iran intensified, criticism of the Western reaction towards what is going on in Iran also responded in a different way. I'm not going to do it again, am I? Okay. Here we can see the criticism developing towards other Western media. The only reactions coming from media outlets in Iran were actually relating to Twitter as their source in order to cover the events in Iran. Criticism of a different source, we can see over here, criticizing both Western powers for turning their backs on the protest in Iran. And of course, the only thing that they could send over to help and assist the Iranian protesters and demonstrators fighting for their freedom, for their votes in the streets, was sending perhaps the bird in order to help them. Now, I would like to finish in the next sentence. Iranian youth pouring into the streets during the last 2 weeks in June 2009 and early July went into the street with the first message, "Where is my vote?" In Hebrew, we call it kol, where efo hakol sheli, heichan hakol sheli, when they mean the vote. Perhaps their votes were rigged, perhaps they were not. But their voices in Hebrew, again, kol, were heard internationally. Thank you.
Liora, I was about to give you 5 minutes more. I mean, never mind. Moving from domestic to regional affairs, the two last lectures will address what may be called as Iran's quest for power, or we have the book of Yitzhak Nakash, Reaching for Power. Our third panelist is Dr. Rabi. Dr. Rabi is the chair of the Department of Middle Eastern and African History at Tel Aviv University, also the vice director of Daniel Abraham Center for Regional and International Studies, and senior researcher at the Center for Iranian Studies. All institutions are located at the Tel Aviv University. Dr. Rabi's main field of expertise include state and society on both sides of the Persian Gulf, state building and oil in the Middle East. Currently he works on 2 projects, one on Yemen and the other on Iran, Israel, and the Arab world. Dr. Rabi will speak on Iran and the Persian Gulf, a bite for regional hegemony.
Thank you, Meir. Let me first thank the organizers for inviting me. I mean, a bid for regional hegemony is something that is well entrenched in Iran's foreign policy. The Persian Gulf has always been the epicenter of Iran's foreign policy. While Iran has established its influence in other areas of the region only in recent decades, it has historically played a leading role in the Persian Gulf and viewed it as its sphere of influence. The Gulf is essentially Iran's backyard, and Iran's policy there represents its most important foreign policy goals. My presentation will focus on the dynamics of relations between Iran and the Arab Gulf states since the Islamic Revolution, but with a great emphasis on the post-2003 period or era. Now, historically speaking, the name Persian Gulf, Khalij Fars in Persian, and the controversy it creates between Persians and Arabs, who refer to it as the Arabian Gulf, Al-Khalij al-Arabi, could serve as a window into the long-standing distrust between Arabs and Persians that has characterized Gulf politics. The ethno-religious divisions, in addition to geopolitical instability and rivalry, have long created tense relations between Iran and the Arab Gulf states. The coming to the fore of the Islamic Revolution greatly exacerbated the existing Arab-Iranian tensions. From then on, Iranian propaganda aimed to demonize both the monarchical neighbors as well as the Ba'athist regime in Iraq, depicting them all as un-Islamic and therefore illegitimate regimes. Throughout the 80s, the Revolutionary Guard supported numerous sabotage acts in the Arab Gulf states. For example, in December of 1981, Iran attempted to bring about a coup d'etat in Bahrain, which was aimed at toppling the Al-Khalifa regime and turning Bahrain into an Islamic republic. In the Emirate of Kuwait, there was a series of bombings, and there was an attempt on the life of the ruler Jabir al-Sabah. That decade also witnessed the 8-year-long Iran-Iraq war, which further serves to illustrate the post-1979 volatility in the Gulf. During the 80s and the 90s, Iran did not conceal its bid for hegemony in the Persian Gulf. But if there was an event that put some teeth into it and gave Iran a momentum, it was the Americans' April 2003 toppling down of Saddam Hussein. By toppling Saddam Hussein and bringing the Iraqi Shia majority to political power, the US invasion of Iraq created a state or a situation in which Iran could exert power as never before. Iranian leaders did not conceal their belief that they were the big winners of the American involvement in Iraq. Mohsen Rezai, the Secretary General of the Iranian Expediency Council, put it bluntly, saying the kind of service that the Americans, with all their hatred, have done us, no superpower has never done anything similar before. Iran has used its historical, religious, cultural, and economic ties in Iraq to establish a broad-based network of local activists and economic ventures as a means of strengthening its influence there. What was most prominent in facilitating this broad-based network was the religious sphere, of course, where senior Shia religious leaders in Najaf and Karbala, including Ayatollah Ali Sistani, Ayatollah Abul Qasim Khoi before him, they have had strong connections to Iran, and religious donations and followers flow back and forth across the border from Iran to Iraq. To a large extent, Iran has utilized this soft power strategy in a very successful way. Iran has adopted a nuanced strategy in Iraq, which has employed cultural diplomacy and soft power, political, financial, cultural influence, rather than military strength or coercion. All this was done in the service of realpolitik. The most basic goal of that strategy has been to prevent the recurrence of a powerful Sunni Iraq that would threaten Iran. It therefore worked to foster a friendly and Shi'i-dominated government with close ties to Iran in a united but not so powerful Iraq that would not challenge Iran's bid for hegemony and would not become a client of the United States. The combination of soft and hard power in Iraq can attest to the pragmatic nature of Iranian foreign policy. Iran has become the most influential Middle Eastern actor in Iraq and proved to the United States that it is a force that must be reckoned with. Iran's support for a wide variety of Iraqi political groups and factions has created instability there, which has kept the United States bogged down in Iraq and weakened its will to confront Iran militarily. The position Iran acquired in Iraq served to exacerbate fears among the Arab states of the Gulf and the Middle East at large. Actually, this was exactly what prompted King Abdullah of Jordan to proclaim in December 2004 that what is threatening the Middle East is a Shiite crescent which threatens to tear up the Arab and Sunni heart of the region. From this stage, deep-rooted animosities and cultural differences between Arabs and Persians, Sunnis and Shiites, came to the fore, fostering a new rhythm. The Arab Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia, did not hesitate to capitalize on this atmosphere and at times using religious motives to better their geopolitical position or its geopolitical position. I don't want to delve into the nuclear saga, but of course, on top of all that, the Arab Gulf leaders also fear that they will be forced to be clients of a nuclear Iran. As if to further exacerbate their fears, in August 2008, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Menashri Mohammadi alluded to his country's growing regional appetite when he said, as long as the royal regimes in the Gulf remain in place, the Middle East will remain a center of crisis. Conflicts will not be resolved unless these traditional regimes disappear. The Arab Gulf states' anxiety grew further when Iran revived its ancient claim to the tiny island state of Bahrain. Ali Akbar Natek Nouri, a well-known Iranian statesman, claimed that Bahrain is the 14th province of Iran, and of course declarations such as these just further alarmed the Arab Gulf rulers. Saudi Arabia was again the most outspoken in attacking Iran's expansionist aims in the region. The Saudi press has issued a number of doomsday scenarios portraying what could happen if Iran succeeds in causing instability in the Arab Gulf states. A Saudi newspaper, and this was corroborated, of course, by some Saudi statesmen, used the Kingdom of Bahrain, where the Shi'i majority is being ruled by the Sunni al-Khalifa family. And they took Bahrain as an example to such a scenario, saying that, and I quote, at a time when the US will soon begin to reduce its presence in Iraq, and when all forecasts indicate the outbreak of a civil war there, the Iraqi chaos will give Iran an excuse for strengthening its presence in Bahrain and for intervening militarily under the cloak of protecting the Shias. A vivid indication of what was causing the Arab Gulf states' anxiety was the issues that topped the agenda of the annual GCC summit, which took place a week ago. Alongside the Dubai financial crisis and the ongoing nuclear Iranian saga, what also topped the agenda was the Yemenite affair. As you know, I guess, a Yemeni Shi'i rebellion, which erupted in 2004 and still goes on, has become an arena of Saudi-Iranian confrontation. The Iranian footprint in Yemen is difficult to pinpoint, yet it is clear. The perception in Yemen and Saudi Arabia is clear that Iran is an active and tacit supporter of the Shi'i Houthi rebels. In April 2005, the leading Shi'i seminary in Najaf issued a statement accusing the Yemeni government of trying to kill the Shi'is, or to actually murder the Shi'is of Yemen. In March 2007, Iranian students violently demonstrated in Tehran against the Yemeni government's policy in Sa'da, in the north of Yemen. In April, a Saudi newspaper, Al-Sharq al-Awsat, reported that Yemeni security services arrested 4 Iranians found with documents and papers confirming their involvement in supporting the Houthi rebellion, the Shi'i rebellion in Sa'da and Sana'a. A column written by Ali al-Sa'ad Musa and published in the Saudi Gazette neatly captured the outrage of what many believe is Iran's meddling in Arab affairs, depicting Iranian involvement in Yemen as the, and I quote, bleeding stab wound in the heart of the Arabian Peninsula. Yesterday, what I got from some Saudi statesmen while actually trying to analyze the changing realities in the Middle East, and while referring to what's going on in Yemen, they just put it loud and clear. The Shia rebellion in Yemen is being referred to by the Saudis as a reflection of what they call Yemenite Hezbollah. It is as if Iran installed another Hezbollah in the mutual border of the Saudi and the Yemenites, and this is something by which Iran is trying to acquire a stronghold in a nearby country to Saudi Arabia, and further actually undermining the Saudi regime. So what we can learn from it is that, firstly, Iranian performance in the Persian Gulf can attest to the pragmatic nature of Iranian foreign policy, the combination of hard and soft measures, running huge trade connections with Arab Gulf states, the port of Dubai, Qatar, and others, but at the same time threatening, at least verbally, the very survival of some of the regimes in the Arab Gulf states. All of these can also attest, of course, to the centrality of the Persian Gulf in Iran's foreign policy. It is indeed a center of gravity when it comes to Iran's foreign policy. On the one hand, we can stick to the notion which is being offered by the scholarly literature, by which to differentiate between the Persian Gulf and the Middle East at large, or the global arena when it comes to Iranian foreign policy. Most often than not, it is being offered that while actually performing in the Persian Gulf, Iran is using pragmatism, nationalist causes, rather than religious ones. And when it goes to the outer or the broader arena of the Middle East, Iran is coming up with its dogma. I think that to a large extent, that still stands. But I would say again that 2003 served to blur the dividing line between the Persian Gulf and the Middle East. Yemen is just one example. What's going on in the Middle East, in my opinion, is a Cold War, which is being waged between Iran and the leading Arab state, as we call them, the moderate Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and others. If we would like to measure the pulse of the geopolitical panorama of the Middle East, I think that we should focus on Beirut, on Gaza, on Yemen, on Baghdad. All of these are kind of spots where you could definitely find the ongoing Iranian-Arab Cold War. Thank you.
Though we are focusing on Iranian regional activism, it should be noted that this activism was facilitated by two main historical developments. First is the diminished pan-Arabism, and the second is the re-emergence of primordial identities, most prominent the religious one, which is one just a note at the background. But Our last speaker is Dr. Eldad Pardo. He's a senior researcher at the Truman Institute. He also teaches in our Department of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies and at the Rodbeck School. Dr. Pardo's field of research covers strategy, culture, and politics in the Middle East with a special focus on Iranian affairs. Today we'll talk about Iran's policies towards Iraq and the Arab Gulf states, a comparative analysis.
Hi, everybody. First, I would like to congratulate each and every one of you for staying put and being here until the very last presentation of this wonderful conference. I'm going to speak after great illuminaries in the area of the Gulf, Professor Kordesman and Uzi Rabi, David Menashri, and others. So it's a big challenge. I hope I will try to do a good job. I was, until last year, I was leading in this institute 2 research groups. One of them was Iranian Global Perspectives that included a line of very good, or let's say excellent, area experts from around the world. And we followed Iran policy from Venezuela to South Africa to Indonesia, Russia, China, Europe, and we compared between these policies and tried to differentiate between the continuous and the changing dimension of these policies. The other research group was religious actors in conflict areas. In that group, we compared religious actors who were involved in conflict and politics, including countries that are religious actors, like the Vatican, for example, or Iran. And from these 2 groups together, gradually we developed a methodology that tried to understand what is the difference between a religious actor or a person or a state that actually believes that the divine is present and active in politics, that one, for example, like Ayatollah Khamenei, before one takes a decision, he can go through a certain mystical process and get an answer from the divine, like we know here in Israel, Sherry Harrison, a leading businesswoman, who takes a decision after getting some direct connection with the divine. So we see this phenomenon across the world. But in Iran in particular, we know that there is a very rich history of mystical sophistication that is connected to philosophy and also is connected to basic Islamic mysticism. We also know that this Islam, as we heard from Professor David Menashri, this Islam of Iran is a unique Islam, a renewed Islam, a reformed Islam that includes many elements that are taken from Shiism, from Sunnism into the Shiism, and there are many, many. This is a very wide topic, but I would just like to point to the great mystic Ibn al-Arabi, who is buried in Damascus, and he was one of the major influences on Ayatollah Khomeini, who also created this country that has one leader and not a group of religious leaders, because it was not about the religious law, but the technique of acquiring the information directly from God, and also the technique of acquiring directly from God some information about the possible coming of the Messiah. When will that happen? And I refer to the Mahdi. So what we'll do today is a comparison following the same methodology of Iranian policies towards 3 neighboring countries, 2 of them in the Gulf, United Arab Emirates and Qatar, and Iraq. And we heard, and you have already some very deep knowledge about the topic. So I will just try to do some schematic comparison and try to see whether we can learn something about Iranian diplomacy and strategy in general. So, okay, so this is, of course, there is oil everywhere over there. What I would like to argue are the following things. First of all, that Iranian policies follow from a coherent strategy that applies everywhere, from Venezuela to the Gulf to the Middle East. And at the same time, these policies are flexible and fashion-made, and they study the area like every good diplomat would do. They study every area, they do their homework, and they try to adapt and fit their policy to the area. Now, before we proceed, we have to understand something about this coherent strategy and policy of Iran that emanate from Iran's dual identity. Iran is, first of all, a nation state, and this is probably true for at least, let's say, at least from the beginning of the 20th century, but it began to behave as a nation perhaps 1,000 years ago, perhaps beginning in 1501 when the Safavids came to power. And also, there is another identity in Iran, and this is the identity of the precursor of a religious international revolution. Now, this works as follows. The title of this man over there, his name is Ayatollah Khamenei, is the leader of world Muslims, Wali Amre Muslimin, and he is also the supreme leader, and he has a number of titles, but none of them include the name Iran. So he is the supreme leader, and Iran is just one country under his auspices, and he would have in the future probably many more. And right now, some recognize it like Hezbollah and so on. And he basically rules 2 entities. One of them is the Islamic Republic of Iran that was created after the model of, let's say, the French Republic or the American Republic. And then comes the the Islamic Revolution that is supposed to represent the changing and revolutionary dimension of this regime. So in a different way, one can see that we have that Iran is a church. You have God's representatives. He has the final say about everything. He's always right. Then you have a state, a country, and under that you have a religious empire in the making. And when we speak about an Islamic revolution, we have to remember that there are 2 Islamic revolutions. One of them was the original revolution, the Great Revolution of Ayatollah Khomeini, that in recent months I see that they start calling it the Small Revolution. And the big real revolution is the Global Mahdi Revolution, GMR, Enqilab Jahaniya Mahdaviyat, and this will come, I cannot tell you exactly when, but let's wait and see. Okay, now let's go to the national interests of Iran, and they are very, very normal and familiar, like security, securing friends and allies, economic development, trade, transportation, communication, education, science, technology, culture, you name it. And then come the church and empire interest. I put them together. And here we're speaking about preparing the ground, for the future, and acquisition of strategic weapons. In the literature, we see that while the Mahdi is supposed to come and raise an army, he is not supposed to do all the work by himself, but it is the role of the believers to start and prepare the army so that when the Mahdi comes, he has the army in place. You have all these proxy organizations, whether it's Hamas or Hamas is not really a proxy, but an ally organization, and Hezbollah, and so on. Another thing that the church empire are doing are eliminating enemies of GMR, of the Great Mahdi Revolution, application of revolutionary tools such as the IRGC, the Quds Force by the name Quds Force is a great expression of the tremendous religious change in Iran, because, as you know, Jerusalem was never really important for Shiism and still is not. But Quds Force, the force of Jerusalem, is an important symbol for this type of religiosity. And of course, we have to look at the strategy of the Islamic revolution, of the Iranian revolution. Many Iranian people will tell you, listen, Iran never invaded any country. But if you look at Israel, for example, or you look at Iraq, you know, these countries used their tanks and invaded other countries. And this is true to an extent. During the Iran-Iraq war from 1982 on, Iran did try to invade, or at least invade back into Iraq. But the tactics of this empire is different. They work with the people by instigating and supporting art movement and also political movement around the Middle East. Lubrani once said it's like weaving a Persian carpet, very slow, very long term, but still this is the ideology. It's very pragmatic, and they try to, whenever there is no possibility to advance, they don't do that. Okay, so let's start our comparison. We start with Iran and Iraq. I start for each of the three cases. I start by giving what I see are the main interests of the country involved, and then I move to Iran and describe how it behaves toward that country as a nation state and as a church empire to be future empire, let's say. Okay, so Iraqi national interest, as I read them and I understand, following, let's say, Maliki, the prime minister, and the ideology of Sistani, it's very difficult to, you know, it's a very complicated issue, but kind of make it simple. Iraq needs to achieve internal security, to keep its territorial integrity. We heard in the last few years there was some problems on the border. They really want to stabilize a democratic modus vivendi among confessional groups, to reach a reasonable degree of independence through building a strong central army and balancing allies and neighbors. Now, what are Iran's interests as a state, as a country, as a national entity towards Iraq? Well, of course, they need security as well. We know that Saddam Hussein invaded to Iraq in the past. They have vast economic interest. There are cultural and religious dimension to it. They need particularly to control Kurdish nationalism, and they have their border disputes, of course, have two sides. Now, let's say how Iran, the church, the empire, behaves toward Iraq. Not Iran the nation, Iran the church empire. First of all, there were 3 to 4 attempts since 1979 to take over Iraq. The first was between 1979 and 1980, when the Iranians tried to create a revolution in Iraq. Then during the Iran-Iraq War, after 1982, when Ayatollah Khomeini decided that the road to Jerusalem, Holy Jerusalem, not important to Shiism at all, goes through Karbala as a on the way. So this meant that they wanted to conquer Iraq. In 1991, this is like why I'm saying 3 to 4, because I'm not sure myself. There was a Shia uprising, and the question, why did the American stop their support to the Shia uprising? There was some Iranian role there. And of course, in 2006, 2007, the Americans were about to collapse. And thanks God they did not collapse. They show that they are made of very strong stuff. This is not Vietnam. But at the time, if one was following Iranians' declarations and Iranian actions on the ground, like, for example, that we are the same family and these borders are artificial and we need to unite the Islamic world, Iran was about to swallow Iraq. Now, Iraq, from this vision, is a springboard to the Arab world and the Levant. We see the collaboration with Syria. Iran would be very happy to control the holy places in Iraq, as they will be to control the holy places in the Hijaz. They definitely try to control and manipulate the government of Iraq, and this goes on. And they try to block the emergence of a better example of an Islamic nation next door, which may prove to be a dangerous example for the Iranian people that we heard. The Iranian people is pretty restless, and they try to use the Iraq arena as a card against the United States, rival superpower, in order to continue with the nuclear project and so on and so on. I need some water. Okay. Okay, this is just one example. This is the Quds Day rally in Iran, and we know that the Quds forces were very actively participating in the Iraq subversion in all the civil war in Iraq. Again, you see the difference between Iran as an empire and Iran as a state. The same Quds Day is now a symbol of Iranian freedom inside. Now, Iran's tactics in Iraq. Let's go to the actual tactics that we heard from Rabi: deep involvement, financial and otherwise, in politics, supporting and army proxy groups, economic penetration, intimidation, national and personal, sophisticated propaganda, culture. Here is not Musa Sadr, Muqtada Sadr, of course, was and is still very much supported by the Iranians, and there are many groups like that. We will not get into it. Here you have another, what you see here is the symbol of the Quds. You see an oil well. We just had this kind of intimidation a few days ago when an Iranian army unit captured an Iraqi well, and here are the Iraqis going to a demonstration against terrorism. Iran was very much involved in that. Okay, Iran and the United Arab Emirates. Here you see them. Okay, United Emirates national interests. Stability and prosperity goes without saying. Security via American bases. For the entire Gulf security depends on the United States. God bless America. With not America, the situation would have been very, very bad over there. Security via American bases and own forces. Developing gradual political participation. This is very important for Gulf states. And the Silk Road. The Silk Road is extremely important. This is a phenomenon that we've seen in recent years in the Gulf, particularly in Dubai, but also in Qatar, other places, that the Gulf wants to take advantage of their unique situation of being in the middle of the way between Europe and the Far East, also having a lot of money and a lot of initiatives. Gradually, Gulf states capture traditional Jewish works, traditional Jewish trades like banking, cinema, real estate, transportation, television, all of these modes of Luftgeschäft, and they are making a lot of money. It's a very good idea of diverting the money of the oil into something new. And by the way, in Qatar also we'll see education and diplomacy, also very, very much Jewish professions that also shows our own tribal origins. What is important to mention here is that Iran actually, while was the classic crossroad of the Silk Road in the past and also the corridor from north to south, fails to take advantage of its fantastically much better situation in that regard because of the conflict between the empire and the state. The empire doesn't want that. The state wanted. The empire is afraid of openness. We heard from Professor Menashri, the poisonous carrot, or in Tom Friedman's words, the poisonous kiss. Okay, Iran as a state. Of course, there are strong business relations, a large and extremely powerful Iranian community in Dubai, and there is this territorial dispute, as is with Iraq, on the Abu Musa, Greater and Lesser Two Islands. Okay, 5 minutes, that's okay. Thank you. Okay, Dubai. Iran is an empire church. Iran the aggressive, or Mr. Hyde, or if you like. Dubai is a loophole in international sanctions, very important. Being locked in sanctions, Iran allows as I just said, as I mentioned, allows the United Arab Emirates to win the Silk Road race. Threats at times, we heard from Uzi Rabi also, and long-term objective, I believe, America out of the region. Iran's tactics in the United Arab Emirates is a cautious policies with occasional threats on islands, Iranian communities, but this is not very extensive. On the other hand, there is extensive work through local business people. Different from Iraq, they don't try to influence the government. They work with local people, but not for gaining more influence. They don't have interest in having influence in the United Arab Emirates. They just take advantage of the great many business people there, particularly Persian, and make use of it. And also, their policy is commensurate with a United Arab Emirate interest. They read the interest of these Gulf countries. They are afraid of Iran. They want good relations with Iran, and they need the business also. Why? Because of the Silk Road, and Iran is actually is the largest business partner of the United Arab Emirates, and all the transportation goes from the Far East via via Dubai to Iran. Credits, smuggled parts, a lot of stuff goes on there. Okay, Iran and Qatar. Okay, Qatar national interest, keeps stability and prosperity, American guarantees bases, becoming a global center for diplomacy, media, sports, and education. So follow Qatar. They wish to see, and they see gradual controlled liberalization, education for women, very developed, and independence through multiple alliances, and intimidation through Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera also has this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. On the one hand, openness in the Arab world. On the other hand, you have Qaradawi, Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood also heavily influenced Khamenei, who translated Sayyid Qutb in the past. So we have here affinity of ideology, pan-Islamism. Shia, Sunni, not that important. And with Al Jazeera, they can threaten from time to time. They have this fits of rage against somebody. It may be Israel, it may be Ethiopia, it may be Saudi Arabia, it may be the Americans in Iraq, so you don't mess with them. Okay, here you see one of the wisest women in the area and her husband beyond her. And this is the same husband with another popular media star. Okay, Iran as a state towards Qatar. Keeping good relations, guaranteeing national interests in joint liquid gas field. That's it. Iran is an empire church in Qatar, ever-growing diplomacy and propaganda collaboration based on Qatar's support for pan-Islamism. We saw until recent month that Iran and Qatar really work together, both when it comes to diplomacy in Lebanon, Gaza crisis, and so on. Long-term, Iranian interest, America out. There are 2 bases, American bases in Qatar, if I remember right. Iran's tactics, strong collaboration with the leadership. No hanky-panky. Okay, conclusions. Iraq. Policies toward Iraq oscillated from attempts to take over, to controlling, to blocking governments, to terrorism, to acquiescence. Right now, if America plus al-Maliki are successful, Iranians just will have to live with that. Let's wait and see. An independent liberal Iraq is good for Iran, bad for imperial regime interests because it shows the Iranians another example. Okay, conclusions for United Arab Emirates and Qatar. Iran keeps good relations with United Arab Emirates and Qatar because they serve to break the sanctions regime. This is Dubai, and help radicalize the Middle East. This is Qatar. Ideologically, these regimes are still considered illegitimate and feudal. They don't form any threat ideologically. They are both Arabs, and they are, the worst kind of Arabs, like Bedouins, and they have the money. So nothing of that sort. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of the conclusions here, that Iran is losing some competition there. Iran balances, what we can learn from this talk, Iran balances national people, its national and its imperial regime interests. I would say that so far, Iran, in most cases, the regime, imperial interests come first, but in a very smart way. Iran works with governments and directly with the people. Government more in Qatar, with the people, or with groups, legally, illegally, in Iraq and United Arab Emirates. So they know to do both jobs. Iran is sensitive to actors' ambition. They listen and they collaborate. While Iran long-term interest is probably remains to push the US out of the region. So this is my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eldad. Many thanks for our 4 panelists. We have about 20 minutes of for discussion, questions, comments from the audience. Yes, please. No questions?
Here.
Where? Professor Maus.
Some of you spoke about the potential or the attempt of Iran to take over Iraq and other places. How about the potential rivalry within the Shia in Iraq and Iran? After all, I mean, it's ethnic. To what extent is it reflected at all? Taking into account also that the only places, the genuine only places of Shia are in Qatar, are not common in Mashhad. So is it anything that, is there potential there? Can you see any sign? Another thing is, you mentioned the Wilayat al-Faqih and Ali Sistani. Although he's Persian, but he has got a different, of course, orientation. Does it also reflect in his talks, propaganda, influence? Is it still influential? Thank you.
Thank you. Cheskel.
My first question is to Professor Menashri. I would like you please to refer to the minorities in Iran concerning their role in the turmoil, to which extent the Blue Jews, the Arabs in the Ahwaz and the Kurds, if they have any part to topple the regime. My second question is to Professor Pardo concerning the Gulf states, how the organization of Gulf state, which is controlled by Saudi Arabia, which is against Iran, except that Qatar is so close to Iran and supporting. Why they don't kick Qatar from this organization? My remark to you also that Abu Musa, Tamb al-Kubra and Tamb al-Sura was captured already during the regime of the Shah, and this is a little bit changed the situation of enmity concerning these islands against Iran.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
The first question is to Dr. Hendelman. Dr. Hendelman, how can you explain that the regime in Iran is not using the out loud, using the internet too to spread his ideas in Iran and his opinion about all the after-election mess? And for Dr. Ruby, how can you explain in the end that everybody's saying that Iran is threatening Israel, although I understood from you that Iraq and Saudi Arabia has to be more afraid, and they're the first target of Iran in the end, and Iran will use nuclear weapon on them before they will use nuclear weapon in Israel.
Okay, other questions? Over there.
Professor Menashri and Dr. Pardo, could you give a wider explanation or definition of Iran's imperial ambitions or supra-imperial ambitions? Does that in any way hark back to historical definitions of Sasanian or Achaemenian ambitions?
Okay, we'll make one round and then. Okay, maybe last question for this round. Yeah, Liora.
If something more is known about the ambivalent relations between Muqtada al-Sadr and the Iranian regime, because it has not been a honeymoon all the time, and there are two interests here, and I'd like to know if Professor Menashri knows a little bit more about it.
Okay, thank you. Please, you can respond.
Liora, I leave your question to the two Gulf experts in Iraq, and I'll try to briefly touch upon a few other issues raised here. Rivalries and conflicts within Shiism. It's built in the Shia theology. It's all the whole ijtihad and the taqlid tradition. There are the different maraji, different sources of imitation can have different solutions, answers to main questions. And I think that we could, from what we could see so far, there is a degree of pluralism within Shiite, among the clergy in Shiism. You could see it even in the funeral yesterday, how they are divided. The fact that there was not any leading Ayatollah to succeed Ayatollah Khomeini in 1989 is telling the whole story. Khomeini passed away after 10 years of Islamic rule. There is not even a single Ayatollah who is prominent enough to fit for succession and faithful enough to follow Khomeini, and then they had to upgrade Khamenei from what he was. Go to the Iranian newspaper. Khamenei was referred to as Hujjatul Islam until June 3rd, 1989, when Khomeini passed away. All of a sudden, it became from Hujjat al-Islam, not Ayatollah, but Ayatollah Uzma, Grand Ayatollah. This is something like taking an assistant professor in university and making him a provost. I'm sure he can work at Hebrew University. It cannot work in traditional society as well. But we have to see that your question may have another aspect, is what is the affinity and relationship between Shiite of Iraq and Shiite of Iran? I think at the end of the day, the Shiite of Iraq will be more Iraqi than Shiite. And we could see during the war between Iraq and Iran. Iraq invaded Iran, the Arabs of Khuzestan, that it has referred to, remained loyal to the Islamic regime. Eldad spoke about the Iranian invasion into Iraq, and then in 1991, we could see that Iranian did not even help the Shiite of South Iraq against Saddam Hussein that they hated so much. My explanation is that they feared that the Americans didn't come all the way to crush the military power of Saddam Hussein just to see another Ayatollah emerging on the wells on the Arab side of the Gulf. At the same time, Iranians did not help the Kurdish people. I think in the Kurdish issue, they feared that the Kurds would be successful. And the last thing that Iran wants is to help establishing an independent Kurdish state. It's going back to what Eldad spoke about, is nationalism as defining the policy. And the last point on this issue, I think that we should note the strength of the nation states in the Middle East. Also, all of them are young states, maybe old nations, but the nation state is still very, very strong, and therefore I think that Shiite of Iraq are more Iraqi than Shiite. Now, well, of course they are Shiite, but they will behave politically in line with the state interest. About the religious minority, you are right. Some half of the Iranian people are not Persians. It's even more than what people tend to believe. Iran is a country with many different ethnic groups, and the largest one you didn't mention, but the Azeris, between quarter and third of the Iranian population. But most of the minorities have been somehow absorbed and into the Iranian system. Khamenei is Azeri, and Mousavi is Azeri. Could name all the leading intellectuals many of the leading intellectuals of Iran are from Azerbaijan. But still, there is a problem. We have large Azeri population in Iran, bordering with an independent Azerbaijan in the north, and then you have the Kurds, the Arabs, the Baluch. I would not trust or not assign the ethnic minorities in Iran, certainly not a religious minority, to be the force to change the realities in Iran. It may, using them may strengthen the government more than it could weaken them. Now, the imperialist vision of Iran. Well, Iran is an Islamic regime, but I think during this revolution we can see that Iran won over Islam. I said very simplistic, but I think what is really defining the Iranian policy is not the religious philosophy, but the national interest of the state, as being defined by the current regime. So I don't think it's Khomeinian, I don't think it's Sassanian. It's the policy reminds me more of a Shiite.
The microphone.
Of a Shiite policy. Iran wishes to export its philosophy. It started with this and continues to wish. But it's very pragmatic in its policy. So it intervenes wherever there is an opportunity. Like, for example, in the Hezbollah, I don't think Iran created the Hezbollah. I don't think that Iran created Hamas. The system was disintegrated in a way in Lebanon, in Gaza Strip, that allowing Iran to penetrate. So Iranian policy today, the Islamic regime, reminds me more of the traditional Shiite exporting their philosophy, not by violently going and exporting, but whenever there is an invitation, they respond positively.
Yeah, Uzi, Eldad.
Okay. Moshe, I think you asked about this Shiite crescent thing, and I didn't get this second half of the...
David only answered it. the ethnic differences. You know, he gave me good answers. So.
Okay, so let's skip back. I have another answer, but we'll talk about that later. Okay.
No, but he didn't say something about the shared crescent. There's a lot has been said about shared crescent.
No,
I didn't say anything. I wrote about it, but I didn't say anything.
I know that, but I think that it is being perceived as kind of a religious cleavage, but basically it's being used for geopolitical motivations. This is what I'm trying to say. And the Arab press is full of this tashayyu or tafris, which means Persianization. And I think that many Arab regimes are using that in order to do or to get both actually attacking Iran basically and to go for their Islamists from within. So they go to the extreme with that. I don't think that there are, I don't know how many Shiites do we have in Egypt, but they do not constitute even 1% of the population. So how could you explain that Al-Haram is full of actually references to Tashayyu and Tafris and things like that being actually done in Egypt? So basically I think it is being used cynically, but for geopolitical reasons. There was a question also, I don't remember, but you asked how Qatar is being allowed to do that. Well, Qatar is not allowed. Qatar is the naughty boy of the GCC. Qatar is doing actually a lot of acts to tease Saudi Arabia. There is an ongoing rift between Saudi Arabia and Qatar. But basically, I would think that the best way to deal with your question is just to differentiate or to have the dividing line in the Gulf. We have the upper Gulf, which is Kuwait and Bahrain. We have the lower Gulf. Lower Gulf states, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, especially Dubai, and to a certain extent also the Sultanate of Oman, have always had kind of a very, I would say, extensive relations when it comes to the trade economy with Iran. Iran is trying to make the most of it. It is as if you would take, I mean, albeit in a different level, the 5+1. Qatar and Dubai, to a large extent, or to some extent, could be perceived as the China and Russia in the 5+1. So if you could just go on developing your relations with them, if you could have kind of a stronghold in the Gulf, if you could have some differences to be used within or among the GCC states, this is exactly goes in line with Iranian modus operandi. I think that diplomacy skills is something that the Iranians should be characterized by. I think that when it comes to the GCC, when it comes to the Persian Gulf and the Middle East at large, actually they are very shrewd and keen diplomats. They know how to make the most of it, and this is how they using their relations with Dubai and Qatar. And this is something that we have to bear in mind, in the aftermath of the financial crisis in Dubai, the Saudis and Abu Dhabi and even the Americans entertained themselves with the kind of notion by which to pressurize Iran or Dubai not to go on in such kind of a volume when it comes to trade and economy with the relations with Dubai, in order to actually keep Iran at bay in front of the dialogue and the diplomatic channel, which we are trying to see if that could work or not. So I would say that you are right, but it is not related to Iran. Qatar and Dubai have always had kind of a different policy when it comes to regional stuff, and especially when it came to Iraq in the 80s and Iran nowadays. I don't think Saudi Arabia is trying to pressurize them, but they are trying to make the most of it, and Qatar, as you know, trying to do more than that while trying to promote, mediation efforts, Israel and others, and things like that. So this is a different story. Now, there was a question about Muqtada al-Sadr and Ali Sistani in Iraq. that Professor Menashri was that so kind to deliver the truth to me. Well, I think that it goes in line with the checks and balances. Exactly. Both of them are being used by Iran. And the Iranians are pretty, I would say, dissatisfied with the notion of Vilayat al-Faqih, which is not actually the cup of tea of Ayatollah Ali Sistani. But Ali Sistani is kind of a very good liaison, a very good kind of a middleman by which to get into Iraqi affairs. As I would try to emphasize, this is what I would call actually bolstering the soft penetration into Iraq. They are being assisted by Sistani, but it could cut either ways. They won't try to persuade him to go all the way and to adopt or absorb for himself the notion of the Islamic Republic, but they would actually find out kind of a modus vivendi by which to work with Sistani. The same goes with Jaysh al-Mahdi and Muqtada al-Sadr. When needed, Iran really used them. Try to think of Iran, and I do think that Iran is a very influential actor when it comes to Iraqi affairs because they hold both harsh and soft tools by which to show from time to time to the Americans, to the Saudis, that it is going to be very pricey to go for Iran. What Iran could do is just to actually plant or install some chaos in Iraq, even though I accept the notion that what Iran is aiming at is to have an integral Iraq. This goes in line with its interests, and I do think that basically it is in line with the checks and balances that Iran is being applied in Iraq. Now, there was another question, I think that, I don't know who, about the Saudis and the nuclear. I mean, could you please just, who said, sorry, yeah.
I asked about the nuclear weapons that, from what you said, I can understand that Saudi Arabia and Iraq should be afraid and more stressful than Israel about Iran has a nuclear weapon than Israel, because they would be the first target before Israel.
Well, listen, I'm not sure that this is what, if I said so, I mean, I'm taking it back. I didn't say that, I think.
No, you said that Iraq is...
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Saudis are really anxious about a nuclear Iran because it would actually provide Iran, especially if there is would-be American withdrawal from Iraq. It would provide Iran with supremacy in the Gulf, or the dominant force in the Gulf. Now, it's not a matter of thinking, it's a matter of feeling. I do think that the Iranian-Arab rift or animosity is there. I know that people do think that the Shiite crescent and the Arab-Iranian animosity is a passing phenomenon. I don't think so. I think that something happened in 2003, and if you would like to have a Middle Eastern calculus, I think that this should be taken as kind of a fact, and Israel could use that and should use that, and there are shifting alliances here in the Middle East as a result of what happened in 2003. I'm going through Saudi press. I'm following closely what the Saudis said, back and forth. Iranian and nuclear Iran is something that they are trying to deal with. One way is to accept that as a notion because they don't believe that the Americans are going to halt Iran. So the Saudis are working under the assumption that in the coming future we're going to have a nuclear Iran. So what are you going to do? One way is just to say that I'm going to do that too. And we heard that from the Saudis, the Egyptians, and others. But more seriously, the Saudis are trying to make the most of it. They are warning the Americans not to leave behind a chaotic Iraq and a nuclear Iran, because for them, it means that they are going to lag behind Iran throughout the 21st century. I don't think that they are thinking of this nuclear capacity being used against Saudi Arabia, but they know. And this is the main thing. The Shia rebellion in Sa'da, very close to the Saudi border. Hamas, Hezbollah, all of them are going to be encouraged and get kind of a source of inspiration if in the Middle East we are going to have a nuclear Iran. That's the problem. I think that what the Saudis would tell themselves, and I think the Israel should tell itself too, the same thing. If Iran is going nuclear, those lunatics or radical movements are going to find a greater room or space for their activities, having known that behind them there is a nuclear backup like Iran. I don't think that
Okay. Eldad, you want to comment?
Okay, Professor Maoz, I just want to, I really enjoyed your presentation and answer. I have a different feeling about Ayatollah Ali Sistani, and this also goes to Liora's question about Muqtada Sadr and all these, the Badrs and all the groups within the Shia Iraq. The fact of the matter is that all of them are connected to Iran. All of them are somehow connected to America. All of them have dealings with other Sunnis, and they live in the real world, and they have to get along with everyone. What I see in Ali Sistani, and I think most Shiites, even though I'm not a Shiite, see the same, is a really tremendously great personality in the tradition of Ayatollah Na'inios. He wrote in 1909 supporting the constitutional revolution in Iran. I think all in all he was very instrumental in helping the Americans to create some kind of a democracy in Iraq, not the American model but a different model. And we only saw, here is Professor Amnon Cohen, only 2 months ago he imposed his opinion that the people should be allowed within Iraq to vote within the lists that run for the elections, and this means that he wants Iran to be more liberalized. So here you have a person that Iraq, of course. Here you have a person that I think is a great man. Okay, I would vote for him. He's not running. Okay, about Qatar. Qatar goes to the extreme. I had the opportunity to speak there in Qatar about in favor of tribalism and arguing that the Jews were also a tribe. And it appeared in Arabic on the front page of the newspaper that I'm coming from Israel. So on the one hand, they meet Ahmadinejad, and then they host Peres, and I think half of this audience here visited Qatar. So it's not. They have a very unique combination of carrots and sticks and Al Jazeera and all that. It's very interesting. Regarding Ambassador Ariel Levin, I would say that the word empire was my dubbing. They don't use it. I said, imperial Iran. This is maybe I shouldn't have done that. They speak about unity, unity of the Muslims. They always speak about the unity of the Muslim peoples and the unity of the world and a just world government for all the dispossessed in the world. Apart from that, from time to time, like when there is this argument about territory, they said, yes, we read, we know that all this territory once belonged to us. And so we don't claim it, but please, we know, we read the history books, and we know that you belong to us in the past. And finally, I'm taking from Liora's question, there are in universities in Iran, there are faculties for when one can study hacking. And usually these are the Revolutionary Guards. They are the new heroes of Iran, and they learn to do hacking and all kinds of other technological tricks. And I guess they do a good job.
Yeah.
Iran shows in recent years, at least from 2003, great transparency online. Since 2003, almost every Ayatollah and every administration, department and division in Iran has its own website. Many times it's a multilingual website in Turkish, in Urdu, in Kurdish, in Arabic, in Persian, of course, in English, in French, in German, etc. They are also disseminating in recent years propaganda, anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism. Only last week we had a colloquium at Tel Aviv University where I discussed specific Iranian outlets disseminating anti-Semitism online. I would also like to say that there are all sorts of theories going on the internet. For example, during the head-to-head Iran election versus Michael Jackson and Farah Fawcett, there was one theory claiming that right now the Islamic Republic is assassinating American celebrities in order to divert the Western media to other topics. Now, of course, when I read this tweet online, it was very hilarious and I laughed a bit. But several days ago, something interesting happened. Ayatollah Montazeri died on Saturday, right? On Saturday night, Saturday evening. And immediately all the tweets began to notify the entire world about his death. The thing is, a couple of hours later, the leading tweets announced that the Hollywood actress Brittany Murphy died suddenly of a heart attack, of a cardiac arrest. She was only 32. And you could see immediately that most of the tweets were talking about her death. So again, an American celeb dies on the same day of an Iranian Ayatollah, and the tweets are celebrating or fighting one against the other. Again, a theory or a coincidence, but we will have to wait for a third round to see if it repeats itself or not.
Okay, thank you. We have little time for 2 or 3 brief questions. Where is the microphone? Yeah.
I'd like to ask the members of the panel, what is the realistic option of either through the CIA or some other groups trying to organize the various exiled groups, the Iranian diaspora, whether in the United States and so forth, to set up, let's say, a government in exile, and then your talks were really fantastic. I don't think that I've ever heard anything as wonderful from American leaders. Do you have any advice for the United States? Thank you.
Thanks. One last question. Over there, please.
Yaakov Fogelman. The philosopher Peter Berger has pointed out a grand sea change in the world, that people have changed from blindly following tradition and authorities, be it parents or teachers or whoever, to thinking for themselves and doing what feels right for them. To what extent would you say this mood also infects Iran? In other words, do the people really want to have this sort of very heavy authoritarian atmosphere, or will it just disappear because the people get fed up with it?
Okay, thank you. Please. Short comments.
Okay, my advice for the Americans is to keep America successful and prosperous. I would like to, about this, the philosopher, definitely in Iran there is a dramatic change in the way people behave, younger generations, but according to revolutionary theories, and revolutionary theories always fail when a new revolution erupts. It has more to do with the regime. As long as the regime is able to keep its forces united and determined and highly brainwashed, then it's very idealistic to expect people just to run and die. But it's hard. One can argue the same thing about North Korea. Why are the South Koreans so democratic and active and have all the initiatives, while the same people in the North are behaving like a machine and dying out of starvation? Well, that's it's tough.
Okay, thank you.
So just briefly, actually I think that the Americans too know that there is no hope for supporting groups out of Iran. I don't think that that will work. I would say just one thing, and I know that Professor Menashri could just deal with that later on, but if the Americans are coming to the conclusion that the diplomatic stuff is useless, if we are going to shift to the sanctions level, sanctions are going to be useful only, but only if the Iranian leadership perceive the sanctions as something that aims at the heart of the Iranian regime, or let me put it differently, the politics of survival, of the future survival of the regime. If the regime in Iran would understand or perceive the sanctions, there would be sanctions, as something that could hurt its very survival, I am sure that we will have a very pragmatic trend or policy coming from Tehran. The other thing is the sea change. Well, listen, I mean, I'm not using, I accept your notion here, and I think that we should further elaborate on that. Maybe Professor Menashri could say something about that. But there is a sea change in the Middle East, that's for sure. I know that I don't think that the Iranians, the people, actually are supporting or encouraging that. But in fact, if you look at the 21st century, in the Middle East, you would definitely say that something happened. The Arab actors are going weaker. This is not the Middle East we used to have in the 20th century. It is not Cairo, Baghdad, and Riyadh who are dictating the rhythm. I think that to a large extent one could say that the non-Arab actors, especially Ankara and Tehran, are coming to the fore, and they are going one way or the other to dictate the rhythm in Middle Eastern politics in the 21st century.
Okay, thank you.